The first warning came not from military sensors, but from an amateur astronomer in Chile. Maria Rodriguez's custom-built telescope caught the quantum signature of massive hyperspace distortions moments before the Krelvax fleet tore through the fabric of space-time. Her frantic message, transmitted through a network of civilian communication channels, was the first crack in the invaders' assumption of a surprise attack. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that didn't officially exist, 4 individuals watched the incoming threat with a mixture of terror and calculated resolve. Dr. Aiden Chen, a quantum physicist with wild hair and eyes that burned with an almost manic intensity, stood before a holographic display that looked more like an abstract art piece than a military tracking system. Next to him, Lieutenant Commander Sura Okoye, a Special Forces veteran whose body bore the scars of past conflicts, traced potential invasion vectors with a hand that never trembled. "They're using a standard hierarchical invasion pattern," Okoye muttered, her fingers dancing across a haptic interface. Textbook Krelvax approach. Massive initial strike to break planetary resistance, followed by systematic resource extraction. To her right, Dr. Yuki Nakamura, a cybernetics expert who looked more like a college professor than a potential savior of humanity, was already interfacing with a custom-built AI system. Lines of code scrolled faster than human eyes could follow, creating a complex web of predictive models and potential countermeasures. The fourth member of the team seemed the most out of place. Miguel Alvarez, a former guerrilla fighter from Colombia, stood quietly in the corner. His weathered face held the kind of calm that comes from surviving situations where death was a constant companion. He understood something the others were still processing. War was never about technology, but about the will to survive. 37 minutes, Dr. Chen announced, his voice cutting through the tension. That's how long we have before their first wave enters viable strike range. The massive screens surrounding them lit up with a kaleidoscope of data. Satellite networks, previously considered obsolete, sprang to life. Military installations around the globe began to move with a synchronicity that defied their previous bureaucratic sluggishness. Years of international tension dissolved in the face of an existential threat. In orbit, the Krelvax fleet was a nightmare of biomechanical engineering. Ships that were part organic, part machine, they represented the pinnacle of a civilization that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Commander Zarek, a veteran of countless subjugations, watched Earth grow larger in his viewing portal. His 6 eyes, each capable of processing information across multiple spectrums, saw nothing but a target. What Zarek didn't see was the network forming below. Every traffic camera, every cell phone, every connected device was becoming a sensor. The amateur astronomers, the network engineers, the retired military personnel, the high school robotics clubs, an entire planet was becoming a single unified organism of resistance. "They have no idea," Miguel said softly, a hint of a smile crossing his weathered face. "No idea at all." Dr. Chen turned, his eyes reflecting the complex holographic displays. "They're about to learn." The countdown continued. 36 minutes remaining. The first Krelvax dropships descended on Los Angeles like metallic nightmares. Biomechanical exoskeletons, each standing 3 meters tall, with armored carapaces that could deflect tank rounds, crashed through suburban streets with calculated precision. Their tactical systems predicted total capitulation within minutes. What they didn't calculate was the improvised resistance waiting for them. In a converted garage just 3 blocks from the initial landing zone, 5 members of a local high school robotics club transformed from students to urban warfare specialists in the span of moments. Aria Martinez, the team's lead programmer, sat hunched over a bank of repurposed computer screens. Her fingers flew across multiple keyboards, each one connected to a different city subsystem. "Traffic control is ours," she announced, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Carlos, activate the construction network." Carlos Rodriguez, who 2 days ago was worried about his calculus exam, now controlled a fleet of hijacked construction equipment. Excavators, crane systems, and automated delivery trucks began to move with a coordinated fury that no military algorithm could predict. The city itself became a weapon. 3 blocks away, a Krelvax combat unit approached an intersection. Their sensor arrays scanned for potential threats, adaptive camouflage systems ready to neutralize any incoming fire. Suddenly, traffic lights began to strobe in complex patterns, a sequence that triggered the city's emergency vehicle routing systems. Massive garbage trucks, street sweepers, and construction vehicles converged from multiple directions. The first truck hit like a precision-guided missile. Commander Zarek watched from orbit, his multiple eyes struggling to process the impossible scene. These weren't coordinated military movements. This was chaos. Beautiful, unpredictable chaos. In Tokyo, the resistance took a different form. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, a retired electronics engineer, had spent his lifetime designing consumer gadgets. Now, those skills translated into something entirely unexpected. Working with a team of equally determined retirees, he transformed everyday electronics into a citywide electromagnetic defense network. "Remember the principles of adaptive circuitry," Dr. Tanaka called out to his team. They worked in a basement laboratory filled with salvage smartphones, industrial batteries, and more spare parts than most universities could claim. Each device was modified, each circuit board reimagined as a potential weapon. Their first test came quickly. A Krelvax reconnaissance unit attempted to scan a commercial district. Instead of clear readings, their systems were flooded with conflicting data. Traffic cameras became jamming devices. Cellular networks transformed into a massive, distributed sensor array that tracked every alien movement. In Rio de Janeiro, the resistance looked different again. The favela communities, long experts at survival against overwhelming odds, turned urban terrain into a nightmare for the invaders. Every alleyway became a potential kill zone. Every rooftop a potential sniper's nest. The Krelvax found themselves fighting an enemy that understood the landscape better than any military could. Maria Santos, a community organizer who had spent years fighting for local rights, now coordinated a defense that mixed high-tech communication with generations of street-level tactical knowledge. Drones cobbled together from spare parts flew reconnaissance. Community WhatsApp groups became real-time intelligence networks. Back in Los Angeles, Area Martinez witnessed something extraordinary. The Krelvax combat units, designed for planetary conquest, found themselves trapped in a city that refused to behave like a traditional battlefield. An excavator swung its massive arm, sending a dropship tumbling. Traffic barriers rose and fell with impossible timing. Fire hydrants erupted, creating instant obstacles. "They're trying to use standard invasion protocols," Area muttered to herself. "But we don't have any." In orbit, Commander Zarek began to feel something unprecedented in his centuries of military service. Doubt. Each Krelvax soldier that fell represented more than a casualty. It was a fundamental breakdown of everything they understood about planetary conquest. These humans weren't just fighting. They were reimagining the entire concept of warfare. The first hour of the invasion concluded with a stark reality. The Krelvax had arrived expecting a simple subjugation. Instead, they found a planet that would fight back with every resource, every system, every ounce of human creativity. This was not going to be an easy victory. This was going to be a war unlike any in galactic history. The interrogation room was nothing like what the Krelvax understood. No harsh lights, no metal walls, no instruments of physical torture. Instead, a soft-lit space with comfortable chairs, carefully selected artwork, and a cup of steaming tea that sat untouched before the captured communication specialist. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned forward, her eyes a study in calm intensity. She wasn't just an interrogator. She was a maestro of human psychological complexity. Years of research into cross-cultural communication, trauma response, and cognitive linguistics had prepared her for this moment. The Krelvax prisoner, designated Ktarn by his communication implants, looked nothing like the conquering warrior his species imagined. His biomechanical exoskeleton was damaged, revealing layers of organic tissue that seemed almost fragile. 6 eyes, normally a sign of absolute superiority in Krelvax culture, now looked uncertain. "Do you understand why you're here?" Alina asked, her voice a carefully modulated instrument of psychological precision. Garen's translation implant churned for a moment. The device was designed to convert linguistic patterns into perfect comprehension, but something about Alina's tone defied its programming. "Interrogation," he finally responded. "Standard protocol dictates information extraction through neural disruptor techniques." Alina smiled. It was not a predatory smile, but one of genuine human complexity, something the Krelvax had never encountered in centuries of galactic conquest. "We're going to talk," she said simply. Meanwhile, across the global communication networks, a different kind of warfare was unfolding. Dr. Yuki Nakamura and her team of digital specialists had discovered something extraordinary about the Krelvax communication systems. They weren't just technological. They were psychological conditioning networks. "It's a closed loop," Yuki explained to her team, holographic displays dancing with alien communication protocols. Their entire communication infrastructure is designed not just to transmit information, but to reinforce a specific psychological state. In the background, lines of code began to weave a counter-narrative. Each transmission would carry subtle psychological triggers, not lies, but truths that would systematically deconstruct the Krelvax's understanding of their mission. Back in the interrogation room, Alina was doing something unprecedented. She was listening. "Tell me about your first memory of service," she prompted Karen. The Krelvax hesitated. No interrogator had ever asked about memories before. Their standard protocols involved immediate information extraction, not exploration. Zarin spoke of a training facility, of being part of a collective, of never questioning the mission of planetary subjugation. But with each word, something shifted. Alina's questions weren't accusations. They were invitations to reflection. Across the planet, human communication specialists were doing something similar. Every broadcast, every intercepted communication channel became a precision instrument of psychological warfare. In military communication centers, veteran SUP specialists worked alongside linguists, anthropologists, and AI specialists. They didn't just want to defeat the Krelvax. They wanted to understand them. "We're not breaking them," Miguel Alvarez observed, watching Alina's interrogation. "We're giving them a choice they've never had before." The global broadcast began subtly. News channels, social media, even entertainment networks carried carefully crafted messages. Not propaganda, but a systematic deconstruction of the Krelvax's fundamental assumptions. Footage showed human diversity, communities rebuilding after the initial invasion, scientists working together, children playing in areas that had been battlegrounds hours before. Each image was a psychological weapon more powerful than any physical armament. In orbit, Krelvax communication networks began to experience unprecedented fluctuations. Soldiers received transmissions that didn't match their expected narrative. Personal stories of human resilience, accounts of cooperation that defied their understanding of interspecies conflict. Zarin's final words in the interrogation broke through millennia of cultural conditioning. "We never considered," he said softly, "that a species might choose complexity over conquest." Alina didn't celebrate. She understood this was just the beginning. The psychological warfare was not about breaking the Krelvax. It was about offering them a different way of understanding existence. And for the first time in their galactic history, the Krelvax were truly listening. The semiconductor factory in Taiwan had never been designed for revolution. Rows of pristine clean rooms, where microchips were typically born from silicon and precision, now hummed with a different kind of energy. Dr. Lian Chen stood at the center of a makeshift war room, surrounded by a team that looked more like a global United Nations of technology than a traditional research group. 36 hours, she announced, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "That's how long we have to turn their technology against them." Scattered across workstations were pieces of captured Krellvax technology, fragments that looked more like organic artwork than mechanical components. A young engineer from Mumbai, Vikram Mehta, carefully dissected what appeared to be a communication relay, his hands moving with the precision of a surgeon and the curiosity of a child. "It's not just a device," Vikram muttered. "It's a living system." The Krellvax technological approach was fundamentally different from human engineering. Their systems weren't just built, they were grown. Biological neural networks intertwined with quantum computational matrices, creating devices that blurred the line between machine and organism. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, fresh from her psychological breakthrough with the captured Krellvax soldier, arrived with a data cache that would prove invaluable. The interrogation had revealed more than just psychological insights. It had exposed fundamental weaknesses in the Krellvax technological ecosystem. Their entire communication network, Elena explained, is based on a hierarchical quantum entanglement system, but it has a critical flaw. It assumes a top-down information flow. The implications were revolutionary. Across the facility, teams worked in synchronization that would have been impossible weeks ago. A retired NASA engineer collaborated with a teenage prodigy from Seoul. A quantum computing specialist from Cambridge worked alongside a materials scientist from Sao Paulo. The global research team operated like a single distributed intelligence. Vikram's breakthrough came unexpectedly. Working with a prototype quantum communication device, he realized the Krellvax system had an inherent vulnerability in its adaptive algorithms. They optimize for efficiency, he explained, but they can't handle true randomness. It was a distinctly human approach, using unpredictability as a weapon. Dr. Lian Chen's team began developing a weapon that was more information system than traditional armament. A quantum communication disruptor that could simultaneously jam, mimic, and deconstruct the Krellvax communication networks. "We're not just blocking their signals," Lian explained to her team. "We're going to rewrite their entire communication paradigm." The first prototype looked nothing like a weapon. A device smaller than a smartphone, constructed from repurposed consumer electronics, smartphone components, and carefully extracted Krellvax technological fragments. Each component was a testament to human adaptability, taking what existed and reimagining its potential. In orbit, the Krellvax fleet began to experience the first tremors of the technological assault. Communication channels started to flutter with impossible data packets. Tactical systems received conflicting information that defied their adaptive algorithms. Commander Zarek watched in growing confusion as his fleet's communication networks began to destabilize. Quantum entanglement channels, previously considered unbreakable, started to produce nonsensical data streams. It was as if the very fabric of their technological communication was being rewritten in real time. Back in the Taiwan facility, Vikram made a final adjustment to the prototype. "Ready for the first full-spectrum test," he announced. The device looked innocuous, a small black rectangle with no discernible buttons or interfaces. But when activated, it would represent humanity's most sophisticated technological counterattack. "We're not just defending," Dr. Lian Chen said, watching the final calibrations. "We're redesigning the entire concept of technological warfare." The countdown began. 30 minutes to the first full-spectrum test. Humanity was about to show the Krellvax that true technological innovation wasn't about superiority. It was about imagination. The resistance had no single headquarters, no central command. It was everywhere and nowhere, a living, breathing network that defied the Krellvax's understanding of organized warfare. In Mumbai, Priya Sharma watched her smartphone become a weapon of galactic significance. A junior network engineer just weeks ago, she now coordinated a vast intelligence network that stretched across 3 continents. Her fingers danced across multiple screens, correlating data from thousands of sources: traffic cameras, weather satellites, amateur radio broadcasts, social media fragments. A Krellvax troop movement in Brazil, detected by a coffee plantation worker's drone. Potential landing zone in the Australian outback. mapped by a team of Aboriginal trackers using generations of landscape knowledge. An incoming ship's quantum signature, first spotted by a teenager's modified radio telescope in Chile. The war room beneath the Rocky Mountains had transformed. What once looked like a military command center now resembled a global communication hub that broke every rule of traditional warfare. Dr. Aiden Chen stood at the center, his quantum communication network turning the entire planet into a single adaptive intelligence. It's not about individual heroism, Chen explained to a group of international observers. It's about collective response. A retired submarine captain in Norway named Erik Solberg proved the point perfectly. His maritime network, cobbled together from fishing vessel communication systems, offshore research platforms, and repurposed naval communication arrays, began tracking Krelvak's naval movements with impossible precision. "They think in straight lines," Erik muttered to his team. "We think in networks." In the Amazon, Maria Santos, the community organizer from Rio, expanded her resistance network. Indigenous tracking teams used techniques thousands of years old, combined with cutting-edge drone technology. Every tree became a sensor, every river a potential intelligence conduit. The Krelvaks found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't just resist, it absorbed and transformed. Commander Zarek's tactical systems struggled to comprehend the impossible data streams. Traditional invasion protocols relied on clear command structures, predictable resistance patterns. But humanity presented something entirely different, a resistance that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Priya's network in Mumbai intercepted a Krelvak's communication packet. Instead of trying to decrypt it traditionally, her team began a massive distributed analysis. Thousands of computers, smartphones, and improvised processing units worked in concert, turning the encryption into a global puzzle. "We're not breaking their code," Priya explained to her team. "We're understanding it." The resistance wasn't just military, it was cultural. Medical researchers shared alien physiology data in real time. Engineers collaborated on technological adaptations. Language specialists worked to understand Krelvak's communication patterns. In a small community college in Arizona, a linguistics professor named Dr. Elena Ramirez discovered something extraordinary. The Krelvak's communication systems contained subtle psychological triggers, remnants of a hierarchical conditioning system that could be systematically dismantled. "They've never encountered a species that can adapt this quickly," Dr. Ramirez told her students, who were now active participants in a global resistance effort. The network had no single point of failure, no central leadership that could be targeted. It was fluid, adaptive, fundamentally human. A weather satellite over the Pacific, a fishing boat's communication array, a teenager's modified radio telescope, a coffee plantation worker's drone, an indigenous tracker's generational knowledge, a retired submarine captain's maritime sensors. Each became a weapon. Each became resistance. Commander Zarek watched his tactical displays with growing confusion. The humans weren't just fighting. They were reimagining the entire concept of conflict. This was more than a war. This was a fundamental challenge to everything the Krelvaks understood about planetary conquest. The resistance had no single face, no single strategy. It was as diverse and unpredictable as humanity itself, and it was just getting started. The battle for Earth's fate would be remembered as the moment everything changed. It began in the Atacama Desert, a place of stark beauty and impossible emptiness. The Krelvaks had chosen this location for their primary planetary assault, a wide-open terrain that should have guaranteed their tactical superiority. Their massive ground platforms descended, each a monument to technological might that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okoye watched from a modified geological research station, her tactical overlay showing what the Krelvaks couldn't see. The desert was never empty. It was alive with possibility. "Activate Stage 1, she commanded. The first wave came from underground. Not missiles, not traditional weapons, but something far more unexpected. Geothermal research stations, originally designed to study the Earth's core, had been transformed into a network of adaptive defense systems. Massive heat exchangers became electromagnetic pulse generators, geological mapping equipment converted into precision targeting systems. The very ground became a weapon. The first Krelvax ground platform stuttered. Its massive biomechanical legs, designed to crush any resistance, suddenly found themselves fighting against a terrain that refused to behave according to any known tactical algorithm. In orbit, Commander Zarek watched in growing disbelief. The quantum communication disruptor developed in Taiwan activated, not with a bang, but with a sophisticated cascade of information that began to unravel the Krelvax communication networks. It wasn't destruction. It was systematic deconstruction. "They're rewriting our own systems," a Krelvax communication specialist reported, his multiple eyes flickering with a combination of terror and fascination. Across the planet, the resistance moved with a synchronicity that defied traditional military understanding. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal tracking teams used drone technology to create impossible battlefield geometries. In the dense urban centers of Tokyo, every piece of infrastructure became a potential defensive position. Dr. Aidan Chen's quantum communication network transformed the entire planet into a single adaptive intelligence. Information flowed not in linear streams, but in complex, unpredictable patterns that the Krelvax tactical systems couldn't comprehend. The teenagers who had first hijacked Los Angeles infrastructure now controlled a global network of adaptive defense systems. Construction equipment, transportation networks, communication arrays, all became part of a living, breathing defensive organism. In the Atacama, the battle reached its critical moment. The Krelvax ground platforms discovered that the desert itself was fighting back. Geothermal vents erupted with precisely calculated timing. Electromagnetic pulses created zones of technological uncertainty. Drone swarms, cobbled together from agricultural equipment, research satellites, and consumer electronics, moved with a collective intelligence that was more organic than mechanical. Sarah Okoye's voice cut through the communication network. "They think in straight lines. We think in networks." The quantum communication disruptor reached its final stage. It wasn't just jamming Krelvax systems, it was systematically rewriting their tactical understanding. Each communication packet carried not just interference, but a fundamental challenge to their hierarchical decision-making processes. Commander Zarek watched his tactical displays dissolve into impossible geometries. The humans weren't just resisting. They were fundamentally reimagining the entire concept of planetary defense. In the Rocky Mountains, the initial team watched the global resistance unfold. Dr. Yuki Nakamura's adaptive AI systems were turning the entire conflict into a real-time learning experience. Every Krelvax movement became data. Every human response a potential new tactical approach. "We're not just defending," Miguel Alvarez observed. "We're evolving." The Atacama Desert battle became more than a military engagement. It was a philosophical confrontation. The Krelvax encountered a species that didn't just fight, a species that transformed conflict into a collaborative, adaptive process. As the first Krelvax ground platforms began to fail, Commander Zarek understood something fundamental had changed. Humanity was not just resisting. Humanity was rewriting the rules of existence. And the galaxy would never be the same. The detention facility was unlike anything the Krelvax had ever encountered. It wasn't a prison. It was a place of transformation. Exarn, the communication specialist first interrogated by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, sat in a room that defied every principle of containment he understood. Soft lighting, artwork from different human cultures, books in multiple languages, a window that looked out over a garden where children played. "This is not standard containment protocol," Exarn observed to Dr. Rodriguez, who sat across from him. Elena smiled. "We're not interested in containment. We're interested in understanding." Across the Krelvax fleet, similar scenes were unfolding. Captured soldiers found themselves not in dark cells, but in environments designed to challenge everything they knew about conflict, hierarchy, and existence. In orbital detention zones, teams of psychologists, linguists, anthropologists, and former military specialists worked in intricate collaboration. They weren't breaking the Krelvax, they were offering them a different way of seeing the universe. Dr. Miguel Alvarez, the former guerrilla fighter who had become a key strategist in humanity's resistance, explained the approach to a group of international observers. They've never encountered a species that responds to conquest with genuine curiosity, he said. We're not defeating them. We're inviting them to reimagine themselves. The psychological assault was precise and multi-layered. Each captured Krelvax soldier was exposed to a carefully constructed environment that systematically challenged their understanding of hierarchy, conflict, and purpose. In one detention center, a group of Krelvax soldiers found themselves working alongside human specialists on complex problem-solving tasks. Not as prisoners, but as collaborative partners. They were introduced to human concepts of individual choice, collaborative innovation, and purpose beyond military service. A Krelvax tactical specialist named Vorak discovered something profound during a collaborative engineering project. Working with a team of human researchers, he realized that innovation wasn't about hierarchical command. It was about collective imagination. In our culture, Vorak explained to his human colleagues, innovation follows strict protocols. Here, ideas seem to emerge from nowhere. From conversation. From disagreement. The global communication network that had been humanity's primary weapon now became an instrument of psychological transformation. Carefully crafted information streams reached not just the detained Krelvax soldiers, but their entire communication network. These weren't propaganda broadcasts. They were complex psychological interventions designed to create cognitive dissonance within the Krelvax's rigid cultural framework. Commander Zarek watched in growing confusion as his communication networks began to fragment. Soldiers reported experiences that defied their training, encounters that challenged their understanding of military purpose. In orbit, the Krelvax leadership began to experience something unprecedented: internal disagreement. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's approach was revolutionary. Instead of breaking the Krelvax soldiers, she was offering them a fundamental choice, a way to understand themselves beyond their current cultural limitations. We're not your enemies, she would tell each detained soldier. We're offering you a chance to understand something bigger than conquest. The psychological intervention went deeper. Captured Krelvax were introduced to human art, music, literature. They were given opportunities to learn, to create, to explore individual interests. Many discovered talents and passions that had been systematically suppressed in their hierarchical society. A group of Krelvax soldiers learned to play musical instruments. Another team began studying human ecological restoration projects. Some became fascinated by human scientific research, particularly in fields that valued curiosity over immediate practical application. Commander Zarek's worst fears were being realized. This wasn't just a military defeat. This was a fundamental challenge to the Krelvax's entire understanding of existence. The detention facilities became something else entirely. Not prisons, but places of transformation, of genuine cultural exchange. We're not converting them, Dr. Rodriguez explained to her team. We're offering them a choice, a chance to see themselves differently. As the Krelvax communication networks began to fragment, something extraordinary happened. Soldiers began to share stories, to question, to imagine possibilities beyond conquest. The invasion was becoming something else entirely. A conversation. The final confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a conversation. The United Nations Assembly Hall had been transformed. Gone were the traditional diplomatic barriers. Instead, a circular space had been created. No head of the table, no positions of hierarchy. Humans and Krelvax sat intermixed, translation systems humming with a soft, almost musical undertone. Commander Zarek sat between Dr. Elena Rodriguez and Dr. Aiden Chen, his multiple eyes scanning the room with a mixture of confusion and emerging curiosity. The rigid military posture that had defined centuries of Krelvax existence was slowly dissolving. We're not here to punish, Dr. Chen began, his quantum communication systems creating a real-time translation that captured not just words, but nuanced emotional contexts. We're here to understand, and to offer a different path. The proposal was unprecedented. Instead of traditional surrender terms, humanity was offering something radical, a collaborative framework for galactic coexistence. Vorak, the Krelvax tactical specialist who had discovered creativity during his detention, spoke first. Our entire civilization is built on a model of hierarchical conquest, he said. You're suggesting something entirely different. Maria Santos, the community organizer who had been instrumental in the resistance, leaned forward. We're suggesting that diversity is strength, that innovation comes from collaboration, not control. The proposal included more than diplomatic agreements. It was a comprehensive restructuring of galactic interaction. Technological exchange programs, cultural preservation initiatives, collaborative scientific research that would benefit both species. Miguel Alvarez outlined the core principle. Conquest is a failure of imagination, he explained. True advancement comes from understanding, not subjugation. The Krelvax leadership watched their communication networks transform in real time. The quantum disruption technology developed in Taiwan now served a different purpose, creating channels of genuine communication that went beyond traditional linguistic barriers. Representatives from different human communities told their stories. An indigenous tracker from the Amazon explained ecological preservation techniques. A retired engineer from Tokyo shared insights on adaptive technological design. A group of high school students who had been crucial in the initial resistance demonstrated their approach to collaborative problem-solving. Each presentation challenged the Krelvax's fundamental understanding of civilization. We're not asking you to become like us, Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained. We're asking you to consider a different way of existing, of growing, of understanding the universe. The most radical proposal came from an unexpected source. The detained Krelvax soldiers who had been psychologically transformed would become the first ambassadors of this new approach. They would help bridge the gap between two fundamentally different civilizations. Commander Zarek experienced something unprecedented. Doubt about the system he had served his entire existence. The technological exchange was equally revolutionary. Humanity didn't want Krelvax technology. They wanted to collaborate on developing something entirely new. The quantum communication systems that had been a weapon now became a tool of unprecedented cultural exchange. Imagine, Dr. Aidan Chen proposed, a galactic network where diversity is the primary source of innovation, where different perspectives aren't a threat, they're an opportunity. The proposal included comprehensive rehabilitation programs for Krelvax worlds that had been built on conquest, ecological restoration, cultural preservation, educational initiatives that would fundamentally reshape their understanding of existence. Vorak became the first to truly understand. We thought strength was about control, he said. You're showing us that strength is about adaptation, about understanding. The final agreement wasn't signed. It was collaboratively constructed. Every clause, every principle was a negotiation, a genuine attempt to create something unprecedented in galactic history. As the discussions concluded, something extraordinary happened. The rigid communication networks of the Krelvax began to fragment, not through destruction, but through genuine transformation. Commander Zarek looked at the humans around him. For the first time, he saw not enemies, not targets of conquest. He saw potential. The invasion was over. The conversation was just beginning.